And if you have a big book in front of you, which I hope you do, you'll want to turn to page 67. But before we get into the text, let's recap, shall we, briefly, how we got here. Remember again, when we finished with our third step, the big book turned right around and told us that this third step could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to find and to be rid of the things in ourselves which are blocking us, which means, of course, blocking us from God. Now, we have come to recognize that these things which block us can be categorized, classified as defects of character, although there are a number of other words which are used. Bill loved to use synonyms. He didn't like to use the same word twice. Wrong, shortcomings, some other stuff like that. But it all comes down to the same thing. It's something messed up with our character. And these defects of character, we've come to understand, are a species of insanity. Our minds don't work right. They don't work as God intended them. And what else blocks us from God is the fact that as we have progressed ourselves through life, especially as a bunch of damn drunks out there going through life like tornadoes, we have harmed a lot of people, and we have done a lot of things wrong. And when we walked in the door, we were carrying, most of us were carrying a load of guilt with us. Well, guilt, it turns out to be just as heavy duty a blockage to our relationship with our higher power as defects or insanity, and we need to be free of that as well. So the big book is telling us, make a strenuous effort to find and be rid of these things. Well, first of all, we're going to have to start out by finding them, aren't we? And that's what the fourth step is for. The purpose of the fourth step is for us to be able to, by going back through our lives and in very, very specific ways, which are outlined in the big book, and following the directions there, we're going to find out what it is that's wrong with us. Did somebody want to share? We need to find out what is wrong with us. That's the fourth step. It's not designed as an indictment of us. It's not designed for us to do it and then to just feel terrible because we're such awful, terrible people. We're trying to find out what's wrong so that we can get rid of it. Now, we have to always go back to basics to understand what's going on here. The basic fact is that we have already admitted that we're powerless over alcohol, meaning exactly what it says. We cannot stop drinking alcohol on our own. All of our human resources, as marshaled by the will, are ineffective. And we're going to continue, therefore, to drink until we die, because we are dealing with a disease which is deadly and incurable. But the program of Alcoholics Anonymous offers us a solution. And that solution is to interpose a loving God, a higher power between ourselves and the booze. The power of that loving God is the one thing that we must have if we are to survive, and not only to survive, but to have our heritage, which is to be happy, joyous, and free. But we can do that. We can't do it as long as we're blocked from God. So we're going to have to find out what it is that's wrong. What's blocking us? Remember that when we started out looking at resentments, and resentments that we are told are the number one offender, kill more alcoholics than anything else. That from these resentments stem all sorts of spiritual disease. And we've not only been mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually ill. We've been spiritually bankrupt. And most of us recognized when we came in the door that we were still children at heart. Our emotions never did catch up with our bodies. In fact, when you're working with a bunch of newcomers, sometimes you may feel like you're a playground monitor. Let's jump into the sandbox. If you're going to throw stuff around, throw sand. But we find out, because we look around us and we see others and we see people who have grown up, we see people who are adults, who are living an adult life, who are sober, whose eyes are bright, whose actions speak for them. And we say, wow, if that can happen with them, perhaps it can happen with me. And of course, that's where the message starts, isn't it? But if it is true, and it is, that we are powerless over alcohol, and we must have God in our lives in order to be set free, then anything which will block us off from God has to go. That makes all kinds of sense to me. If it's there and it's blocking me and my life depends upon it, then I better get rid of it. But first I have to find out what it is. These resentments are the number one killer. We also found out when we took our third step that there was another massive problem that we were undergoing. That was the fact that we've been living in self and selfishness and self-centeredness and self-centered fear and self-delusion, and that our problems were of our own making. But most difficult of all to understand was that we could not get rid of this self on our own. That we are as powerless over self as we are over alcohol. We are as powerless over our resentments as we are over alcohol. We have to have God's help. We're also told that we must be rid of this selfishness or it'll kill us. Why? Because of course there's no room in our heart and our soul and our spirit for God when it's loaded with self. So we're going to have to make room. So we set about doing our inventory. We found our resentments. And after we had done so, we looked to see what was going on here, and we realized that these resentments had been literally dominating our lives, ruling us. That we had dedicated our lives to the resentment of others, to hatred, the thoughts of revenge, the flashes of anger, the deja vu that came back to haunt us, the bad dreams, all of those things occupied our lives. And while we were thus occupied, there wasn't any room in there for God. In fact, the Big Book says that these resentments shut us off from the sunlight of the Spirit. Told us we had to be free of these resentments. Then it said, now wait a second, you can't wish these resentments away any more than you can alcohol. You are as powerless over these resentments as you are over alcohol. If you want to be free of these resentments, and you must, then you're going to have some help. You're going to have God's help in this. And once having recognized the resentments for what they are, once having recognized that we must be free of them, we have already done the work to find out what it is that was done to us. What were the wrongs that were done to us? What was the harm that was done to us? What were those triggers of behavior of others which caused us to be angry and threatened? Where had they been so unfair that we felt as if we had been diminished, and therefore we're threatened and angry? And having looked at this and having cataloged all this stuff and written it all down, now we go back and we look at it and we say, all right, I need to be set free from these resentments. And the Big Book tells me that what I must do is I must recognize that these people who harm me are perhaps spiritually ill. That in fact the matter is they're as sick as I am, they just don't drink over it. Now that's no damned excuse for their bad behavior. We're not going to sit here and say, oh, they did the best they could. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. So what? It's irrelevant. We're not here to excuse their actions. We're here to forgive their actions. You see, that's the spiritual solution, isn't it? We're going to pray for these people. We're going to ask God to give them everything that we would want for ourselves. We're going to ask God to make us willing to forgive the wrongs that they've done. And we're going to find something of enormous value which will stay with us for the rest of our lives. That when we're praying for somebody, we can't hate them at the same time. And as we pray for them, whatever the hatred was, whatever the resentment was, fades away and is gradually replaced by love and understanding and compassion. Now, how wonderful is that? We have just been freed from resentments that were killing us. If we want to be free, we pray for the people who harmed us. And we ask God to make us willing to forgive the harm that they did. Having done this, of course, the next thing we must do is look to see what's wrong with us. We already found our resentments, so we can put those aside for right now. That's already done. Not only did we find them, but the big book, God bless the big book, gave us the complete spiritual solution to being freed from the resentments we walked in the door with. Now we're going to have to find our dishonesties and our selfishness and our fear. And so what we do is we go back to the list of the people we resented, and we start answering the questions that we find on page 67. And those questions are directed to us, and they require us to give a narrative answer. And in answering those questions, we're going to write down whether in our relationship with these people we had been dishonest, or selfish, or self-seeking, or afraid. And we also have to look to see whom we've harmed. So we have 5 questions to answer with respect to each one of those folks. Now keep in mind, please, that this is why the forms that are out there that have you combining these 2 parts of the 4-step fall so far short. You see, what's happening here is that as we have looked at our resentments and we have not looked yet at ourselves, we have been allowed to be freed from those resentments. And by the time we get over here to look at ourselves, the resentments are no longer coloring this matter at all. Now we can look honestly at ourselves. And that's what we do. And once we have completed that, one of the things that comes out of it is that we've found people we've harmed. And right here in the 4-step, we begin to compile our 8-step list. Remember? Because we're beginning to list the people we've harmed, and we're beginning to become willing to make amends to them all. Now, this having been done, we've come to the 3rd part of the 4-step. Remember, there are 4 parts: resentments, our faults, fears, and our sex inventory. The 3rd part of the 4-step is our fears list. We're going to inventory our fears. Now, you would say, well, look, wait a second. I did my resentment list, and I found the fears associated with my resentments. I did the list of my own faults, and with respect to the people on my resentment list, I found more fear. Why is it now that I must do a separate fears list? Well, the reason is simply this. We're not going to leave one single fear unturned. We're going to turn over every rock that might have a fear under it, because these things are so insidious. Let's see what it says here at the bottom of page 67, last full paragraph. Notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties of Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, employer, and the wife. That's referring to the resentment list on page 65. Listen to this now. This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. What a fantastic word picture that is. An evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. I like to think of it this way. Look here, let me show you. If we consider that we would want our lives to be a magnificent tapestry, which we could hang on the wall, and everyone could see our lives, see how beautiful they were, and what we had done in life. And we wanted this tapestry to be representative of a good life, of a sober life, of a moral life. We would want this tapestry to be something that our family and our friends and our associates would be proud of. They'd say, I know that person. I know that Jim. Look at the tapestry of his life. What in fact happened? Let's assume that the warp and the woof of this tapestry, those are the large threads upon which the colored threads are hung, horizontally and vertically, warp and woof. Let's say that the warp and woof of this tapestry we were weaving of our life was fear. And every time we tried to weave a coherent picture of some part of our life, fear got to it and that picture was skewed out, or it rotted away, or the colors ran, and you could never see anything that made any sense. All you could see would be one failure after another. This is fear. Let's put fear in another perspective. It may very well be, and I believe this with all of my heart, fear is my only enemy. I believe that fear, if there is a devil, fear is his name, certainly one of his names. I believe that fear is so insidious because it is the antithesis of faith. Now, how am I to ever have a life in a world which is controlled, was formed by and is controlled by a loving God, if I have absolutely no faith in that God and am unwilling under any circumstances to either seek or to do His will? Where is it that I'm going to have even the slightest chance? Unless I happen to be one of those who had great wealth, great power, and exercised it and subjected and subjugated everybody around me to my will. And yet, in every instance that I know of, the people who do that eventually come to their own Waterloo. And so, if I wish to be free of fear then, and I do, I have no choice but to look at the possibility, at least, of the growth of some kind of faith that will supplant the fear. Faith and fear cannot live in the same house. And when I came in here, in most cases, most of us were faithless. We may have had the faith of our childhood, which we had long tried to swallow, forget, or deny. Some of us still professed a great deal of faith, and that's wonderful. It may be a great starting place, at least, for what we need to do. But not only do I need to have faith, but I'm going to have to put faith to work, because faith without works is dead. Faith as a state of mind seems to have little or no value. Now, where in the world is this faith going to come from? How is it that I, who am faithless when I come in the door, scared to death that there might really be a God out there because I know that He must hate me, certainly is out to get me. The next lightning bolt over the Everglades is meant for me. How am I supposed to turn from that to acquire faith? You know what, guys? We are so blessed because we have a big book which is divinely inspired and which contains all the answers that we need to have to know how to proceed to do this. The big book gives us the directions to follow, which will, if we follow them, inevitably lead us to a place of faith. Faith will grow because we will take one leap of faith after another. And as we do so, and the promise comes true, and God comes into our lives, and we feel God working in our lives, and we say, wow, that worked! That really worked! And maybe in 10 minutes we forget it. But then along comes another instruction, another leap of faith, and we do it again. And it works again, and we say, wow, it's still working. And one of these times we're going to have to give up and say it will work all the time. It will always work. Well, that's pretty much what you could call faith, isn't it? But faith without works is dead, so now we have to put that belief to work. Which means that every time there's a decision to make, we let it all hang out and we say, okay, God, I'm doing the best I can here. I'm going to do my part, but I'm going to trust you for the result. Every time. Remember what Bill said all the way back in his story? We have to turn in all things to the Father of light. All through the big book is the same message over and over and over and over and over and over again. Give up, for God's sakes, give up. Say, God, it is you who are in charge of this. You are the Father. I am the child. What do you want me to do next? Here I am. Use me. What in the world did we say in our third step prayer? We may have just gone right by it because we just thought that was something you mouth so you get on to the fourth step, or at least get your sponsor off your back. That isn't it at all, is it? Because I'm offering myself to thee to do with me and build with me as thou wilt. No exceptions. No reservations. Most of us would not particularly like the idea of being sent off to a nunnery or perhaps to a monastery, although I've known people who found that was the end result of working the steps. We may not want to become a missionary in the deepest, darkest parts of the South American continent. But if that's God's will for us, didn't we just say something? To do with me and to build with me as thou wilt? What does that mean? If that means anything at all, it's a complete and utter surrender of our will to God's will, saying whatever it is you want of me, I'll do it. Right? Now, that's pretty scary. Or maybe it is. Doesn't need to be. And so when the steps come along and we start working these steps and we start taking these leaps of faith and we begin to find out that it's absolutely true, that God loves us, that He's there for us, He's always been there for us. He was just waiting for us to open the door one little crack so He could come flooding into our lives. Some of us got down on our one knee, holding the other in reserve, saying, God, if you're there, show yourself to me. Or, to whom it may concern. And lo and behold, he didn't care. He said, wow, okay, here we go, zap. And then we had to say, like Bill said, you know, he said, I learned that I had to pray just as if there were a God. And when all those miracles started coming, I could no longer deny that they came from a place greater than myself. They came from God. That's when faith came. He was right. And that's what happens with us too. That's why the last word in Dr. Silkworth's opinion is pray. This is coming from that great agnostic Dr. Silkworth. Why? Because he saw that that's what worked. All right, so we're going to want to supplant fear with faith. But that may be a little bit down the road yet. So right now we've got to say, well, yeah, but I got all these fears. What am I going to do about them? Big Book says never fear. Oh, probably doesn't say it. It says, don't panic. Maybe doesn't even say that. It says, okay, look, here's the solution. Be patient. There is a solution. And the solution is right here on pages 67 and 68 in our big book. Now, I will have to say to you that this is only two legs of a three-legged stool. The last part of the solution we will find in the fifth step. However, most of us sneak. We don't want to wait for the fifth step, so we start using it right away. One of the most amazing things is, you know, as we go along through this stuff, and we're working these steps, and we find out what these solutions are, and we work them, and we use them, and they work for us, and then we're talking to our bright-eyed friends, and they'll say, what do you need all that AA crap for? Oh, well, suddenly we can't remember what we did that got us here. And then we start to balance our lives. And when we balance our lives, we forget all about what we said back in the third step prayer, God, take my life and do what you want with it. Now I'm going to do what I want with it because my friends told me I should. And so what happens here is we get all these wonderful solutions, but if we don't keep using them, we lose them. I don't know, they fade away for some reason. But it's easy, you know, because we've got that beautiful 10th step. That's a step of inspired genius. It takes all these tools and puts them in one place and says, okay, use these every day. You get to practice this stuff every day. It's right here. Use it. Now let's think about fear and what it's done to us. It says the evil and corroding thread. When we were young, we were lied to on a massive scale, not by people who were trying to lie or intended to lie or wanted to hurt us anyway, at least most of them didn't. They were telling us what they believed because what they had been taught. It hadn't worked very well for them, but they taught it to us anyway. They said to us, if you want to be successful and happy and secure in life, you're going to have to go out and you're going to have to get an education, you're going to have to get a career, you're going to have to make some money, and you're going to have to accumulate some things, and you're going to have to get a lot of people who say yes sir and yes ma'am to you. Learn to control people, learn to influence people, learn to have power over people, learn to have power over your life, be empowered, wear power ties, go to power luncheons, learn how to sit with power, speak with power, and then you'll be just fine. And we believed all that stuff, and it was wrong because it never worked. The trouble is that we got pretty far with it. We got a little bit of a castle built up from some of this stuff, and we thought we were really hot stuff. But about that time, fear started to work and knock down the walls of our castle. The fear was coming at us from all directions. Fear of losing what we had, fear of not getting what we needed, fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of economic insecurity, fear of being punished, fear of being found out for who and what we are. And these fears were in there eating away at us like you know, we weren't even aware of it. It's like having a wooden ship with the termites in it. That's the little shipworms that get inside. You can't see them until the first big storm comes along and the ship breaks apart. And you say, how come? This was a sound ship. You didn't look inside the planks. That's where the worms had just eaten it all out. Or don't go walking into a house in South Florida and a termite inspection in 3 years. The floor will probably fall out from under you. Those termites are fear. Now here's what's happened to us, you see. You got to understand that this fear is a powerful force. It even is able to override that which God gave us as our birthright. We were given 3 natural instincts which are meant for the preservation of the species and meant for our good and meant for our survival. We were given the instinct for sex, which is a powerful one, the instinct for society, and the instinct for security. And these 3 instincts, as instincts, operate below the level of conscious thought. They're not something we have any control over. And they're good when they're given to us. And they work well. And then fear comes along, and fear warps and perverts and mashes these instincts into an unrecognizable form of insanity. And by the time we walk in the door, our brains are mush. They don't work right. None of our instincts work correctly anymore. We call these warped instincts defects of character. They are a form of insanity which is so insidious. It's been sneaking up on us for so long, we don't even know how nuts we are. Which is the pure definition of insanity. Because if you know you're nuts, they say you're not really nuts. I've never been able to figure that one out. Maybe you guys have the answer. What's happened then is that these natural instincts have been warped by fear, so that now we have our defects, and we're going to have to be free of them. They block us from God. They destroy us. They destroy our relationships. They destroy our lives. They're a cancer in the soul, and we cannot abide them, and they must go. We have to be free of them. That's what we're doing here in our 4th step, to find out what all this stuff is. And this is what fear has done to us. Every time we feel bad, without exception, there is a fear involved. You're feeling bad, you got some psychic pain, the first thing you ask yourself, okay, dummy, what are you afraid of now? There's a threat there of some kind. We got to find what it is. So we're going to learn how to be free of fear. And we're going to learn how to inventory our fears. And we're going to learn how to write down what caused them, what's the threat. And then we'll learn how to be free of them. We've learned that fear is an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence is shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune. And we felt we didn't deserve. But did not we ourselves set the ball rolling? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper even though we had no resentment in connection with them. We ask ourselves why we had them. Now let's take a look at some of those fears which are pretty common to all of us. And I suppose if we were to be able to take a look at mankind or womankind in general, we would find that these fears run throughout all of the human race. I do not believe that they are unique to us, but nevertheless, these are the fears that we most often will find. The first of these fears, which seems to be the most common fear of all, is the fear of losing what we have. Now, a lot of people seem to be afraid of losing what they have when they really don't have very much, but it doesn't matter, does it? It's still whatever they got, and they don't want to lose it. Much of this fear, by the way, does not mean fear of losing material things. Much of it has to do with losing something or someone where a dependency has developed. And dependencies turn out to be one of the most critical things that we have to deal with, one of the most damaging things we find in our inventory. Because when we are dependent upon other people, or dependent upon circumstances or material things, we find that our dependency on God is very hard to come by. And that what really is happening is that we have made ourselves extraordinarily vulnerable to other people. And yet we continue to stay dependent. How often have you heard somebody say, "But I love him"? Maybe you've even said it yourself. And when I hear that, I say, uh-oh, tilt, we're in trouble now. We got a big problem now. One of the most difficult things to get anybody to understand and agree to and accept is that love is not enough. And there is no such thing as love, which is nothing more than a state of mind. Love which is not expressed is nothing but a bunch of electrons in collision in gray matter. Love which is expressed and acted upon, that's love. Think about it for a second. When we say our 3rd step prayer and we ask God to take away our difficulties so that the victory He gives us over those will allow us to bear witness to those we would help of His power, His love, and His way of life. How are we to bear witness to God's love if we are not acting toward them with love? Demonstrating God's love working in and through us. And thus it is that we find that these dastardly states of mind, which we love to, I use the word advisedly, love to call love, are really nothing more than a dependency which we have allowed to develop way beyond its last useful life, which may have been years ago. Certainly may have been months ago, and yet we seem to be clinging to it. And we're afraid of losing the object of this dependency. And maybe one of our most important fears, our most damaging fears, is that we will be left high and dry, that we will no longer be able to depend on, especially on this person. And it doesn't seem to matter how many times we've been beaten, or cheated on, or lied to. We can't give it up. Our dependency is so strong. And we're so afraid of losing that which we depend upon that we will go to any extreme to try to keep it. We destroy ourselves in the process of hanging on to these dependencies. And yet the big book is pretty clear about it, isn't it? That our dependency has to be on God. If it's on other people, we're not going to recover. What the heck are they going to do about our alcoholism? Go find your wonderful man or woman out there you're dependent on and say, okay, now, cure me of my alcoholism, will you please? What? What in the world are you talking about? Use a little willpower. Go to detox. Check into a treatment center. And we say, yes, sir, because we're afraid that if we don't do that, we're going to lose what we think we have. We never had anything to begin with. It was all a chimera. It was a phantom. It was nothing. And we thought it was so great. Anytime you want to know about somebody that you're planning to get dependent on, you better spend a long time watching to see what they do. You're going to know them by their actions, not by their words. Oh, but I love you. Oh, I'll never love anybody as much. Aren't we silly sometimes? And yet, you know, it may sound silly and we laugh about it, but how tragic it is in so many cases. Another fear that we almost all have is not getting what we want or need or think we need. Our dear friend who wrote the story in the back of the book tells us this way on page 553. She says, I get everything I need in AA. Everything I need I get. And when I get what I need, I find invariably that it's just what I wanted all along. What a wonderful thing. And yet we're afraid that we're not going to have what we need. And it really doesn't have a whole hell of a lot to do with having enough to eat and a roof over our head in most cases. Gosh, no, it's that new car. Or that condo which is closer to the beach. Or maybe that new job where the boss doesn't yell so much. Or maybe just a job. Maybe we've gotten tired of the kind of life we've been leading. We think that this is what is going to make us happy and content and secure, and it never is. Never, 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 never. All of these things turn to ashes in our mouth before we've had them very long. There is no satisfaction. And you know what? We substitute satisfaction for bragging rights. We love to build our egos up and be able to brag about the stuff we have and how we got it. Somehow or another, this is supposed to be a substitute for true happiness and contentment and joy and serenity, and it is not, and it never can be. We are afraid of failure because we have failed so often. We're afraid of rejection because we have been rejected so often. Maybe we haven't been rejected at all, but we've been spending the last 15 years expecting it. One of the most desperately terrible things that can happen to a human being is to be shunned. Think of Hester Prynne and the Scarlet Letter. Stuck a big A on her chest, and now nobody can speak to her or have anything to do with her or even admit to her presence, and yet she must live here among us. The fear of rejection is a very powerful fear, and we go to any lengths to keep from being rejected. To the contrary, what we want, what we desperately desire, is to be admired, for people to think kindly of us, for us to have 16 invitations for every weekend so that we get to choose the one that we think is the best. We want to be popular, we want to be admired, we want to have all of those trophies and awards, and everybody say how wonderful we are. And we will go to any lengths to get it. Goodness sakes, don't come into and say anything controversial. There's going to be some old alligator back there who'll say, well, that's not the way it was when I came in. Don't you know you just don't drink and go to meetings? You don't drink. If your butt falls off, you put it in a little red wagon, you drag it to a meeting. That's the way you stay sober. So don't mention the big book. God, don't mention the steps. Oh, you can say the third step, that's okay. Everybody kind of likes that because it doesn't really mean anything. Big book says it doesn't mean anything unless we go on to the fourth step. Well, the first step you can mention there, you could be a Texas two-stepper, you know, that's what they do down there. First step, 12-step, first step, 12-step. You get to brag about that one. Man, I was out there, man, I went out there and I 12-step. You should have seen this drunk I 12-step. What happened to him? Oh, I don't know. But I sure 12-stepped the heck out of him. And so we don't want to be shunned. We want to be accepted. We don't want to be rejected. Think about the idiot things we do to avoid rejection. So it's a big fear. We are very, very afraid that people are going to find out what we're really like or who we really are. How many people in here can honestly say that they do not function in AA room with a AA persona which they have carefully crafted and which they stick to with like glue so that everybody will know exactly who and what they are? Or that is to say, what their role is, what their character is. We got all kinds of characters around here, you know. Real characters. Some of them even tell the truth once in a while. I don't know. Well, there's one guy that goes to a meeting here in this club, and I get a kick out of him because his story changes every time he shares. I know he forgets what he said the last time. And he just makes the stuff up as he goes along. I remember the time he said that his sponsor lived in a cardboard box on the sidewalk, but he used to call him every night, and I had to wonder. God, I've been hearing about that cardboard box sponsor for the last 30 years. That story has gone around. You know, the people who are on the circuit who go out there and speak at these conventions, they're really a unique bunch because they borrow all this stuff from each other. And the whole idea is that if you want to be invited back, you got to be funny, you got to be entertaining, and the selection committee's got to be able to say, "Wow, got to get her for our next quarterly." You even get to be invited overseas and all kinds of stuff. You're funny enough. But you see, the problem is that most of those folks have a story which could not be crowded into 6 lifetimes. And so they just borrow from each other. It's kind of interesting. I was on that circuit for 5 years, and I knew all of those stories by heart. They came from different people, and I said, boy, there's a whole bunch of people out there that have had exactly the same adventures. We don't want people to find out who we really are. We're afraid of it. We certainly don't want them to find out what we used to be. We've been telling lies about that all our life. I remember in Beverly Hills when I was practicing law, and that wasn't good enough. I was a CIA agent in one of the bars. Why? I don't know. Don't ask me why I did that. It wasn't good enough that I was practicing law there. But I figured all those people in that bar were so soused all the time, they wouldn't know whether I practiced law or not. But a CIA agent, now that impressed them. I remember one guy coming up to me one night and saying, "Man, I've got some secrets to tell you. I know some spies. They're right down there in L.A." I said, "Well, okay. Call me tomorrow and we'll go pick them up." Another thing we're afraid of is, we've done all this crapped out stuff and God's going to get us. A lot of us have been told that. We started out with our childhood and we were told that God was going to get us. Some of us were being told that while we were getting rapped over the knuckles with a ruler. And the problem is, I remember when I was a kid, I used to think I remember I lied one time. There was a thunderstorm, and I was absolutely certain that thunder and those lightning bolts were meant for me because I had lied. We carry some of that, I suppose, some of us at least do, into our adulthood. And so we know that we have done a lot of stuff. Some of us have been running from that stuff for a long time. I'm not altogether sure the geographics are to get away from booze. I think more of the times they're to get away from the marshal, the guy at the process server. But anyway, we're afraid that we may be found out for who we really are. And there are other fears that the program won't work for us, that we'll drink again. Now then, let's look at another side of this, because people tell us that we're supposed to be afraid. We're supposed to have fear. We're supposed to keep it green. We're supposed to remember our last drunk, and that if we cannot remember our last drunk, we haven't had it. And I always want to ask them, what do you say to people who are in a blackout? They can't recover? God. The big book tells us over and over and over again that if we're a real alcoholic, there will come a time when we cannot recall to mind the worst drunk we've had, or even the drunk of 2 weeks ago. It will not come back for us, and we'll drink again. Let's take a look. I think I kind of messed up that quote. I want to get it right. So look at page 24, please. Look at page 24. Just open your books up there. Let's get this exactly right. The italics. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. So what difference does it make if we're scared of the next drunk? We don't have a choice. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. Here's the rule. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or month ago. We are out without defense against the first drink. So let's give up this idea that fear will keep us sober. It is useful at first. It is useful at first because when we come in here, we are without hope, we are hopeless, we are in terrible condition. But as soon as possible, we're going to substitute a loving God for fear, and faith in that God for fear. So now these are the basic fears that we most of us have. We're going to write down our fears, and then we're going to write down what caused our fears. Now, the cause of fear, of course, in almost every instance is going to be a threat of some kind, isn't it? And the world and all of its people will continue to threaten us. That's why we have a 10th step, We're not going to escape from the world just because we've worked the first 9 steps. The 10th step is designed specifically for us so that when fear comes back and warps our natural instincts again and our defects pop up again, that we've got the tools right in our hands to use to be free. That's why we have a 10th step. Sooner or later, there will come a time, if we stick around here for a while, when we'll almost never be in fear, we'll almost never feel threatened, and we will know for an absolute fact that when we feel fear, we're insulting God. We're saying, God, I don't trust you. But anyway, we're going to write down what we believe caused our fears. Now, one of the things you want to look at when you're doing that is that we're taught, and we believe, most of us, that history always repeats itself, right? Well, that's a deadly thought for us, because every time we have something which faces us today, which is to be consummated or will begin to happen tomorrow or the next day, and we had a bad result from that the last time something like this happened, if we believe that history always repeats itself, we are going to be in immediate fear that we will be having the same bad result we had before. But that's not true. It's not true at all. The past has no power over our present and our future if we change our actions. If we take different action than we took the last time, we're not going to get the same results. That's axiomatic. That's ipso facto. If we don't change our actions, if we do what we did before, we'll get what we got before, no doubt about it. And that's what the hell we've been doing all this time. Now we've been spending a whole bunch of time trying to figure out what we were doing that didn't work so we can quit doing it. And then we can start doing what will work. And when we do that, our whole life changes. That's AA program. Stop doing what doesn't work, start doing what will work. We also have to look to see if there has been some kind of a threat to our pride, because quite often that will be the trigger mechanism for fear. Whatever it is, we're going to write down what we perceive as the cause of the fear. Now then, that's the problem. We've got these fears, and relying upon the big book as we do to continuously lead us in the right direction and give us the solution. Let's go to the second full paragraph on page 68. And these two paragraphs I commend to you as being two of the most beautiful and powerful and important paragraphs in the whole big book, because only tangentially do they refer to fear. These paragraphs deal with you and me in all aspects of our lives. Perhaps there's a better way we think so, for we are now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. Oh, I hope so. I hope so. If we are, we have arrived. This is something. This is it. A basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. When we do that, guys, everything works. You want your life to work? Turn it over. Leave the results to God. Do what you need to do. Do what's in front of you to be done. Do the next right thing. Don't hurt another person. Leave the results to God, and look what happens. It will always be something miraculous and beautiful. We are in the world to play the role He assigns. What did we ask for in the third step prayer? Offer to you to do with me and build with me as thou wilt. Unconditional offer. Now this next sentence is really, really important. It applies across the board. Let's set the stage. How many times have you said, or have you heard people say, how do I know what God's will is for me? I think maybe I'll just sit down on the couch and surf for a while. And maybe it'll come to me. Because I don't dare do anything if it's not God's will, right? But wait a second. God and the big book have given us an out. Not just an out, but an instruction. And here's what it says. Just to the extent that we do as we think He would have us, and humbly rely on Him, does He enable us to match calamity with serenity. We have no excuse for inaction, unless we are morally convinced that at the moment that's what God wants us to do. Sit tight and see what happens. Sometimes that's true. But if we are doing what we are convinced God wants us to do, that's half. But what's the other half? Relying on Him for the result. Then we're going to be just fine. Now we may not always choose wisely. We may not always be right. We learned back on page 87 that this is the case. That from time to time we may do something pretty foolish. But that as time goes by, we will come to rely more and more on the fact that God inspires us. That we are able to be inspired by God. That we will be able to be intuitively aware of what He wants for us. As a matter of fact, when we reach the 10th step, what does it tell us? That we will have developed a vital sixth sense, which means that we are able, under almost all conditions, if we are willing to accept the answer, to find out what it is that God wants us to do. But we have no excuse for inaction. We never apologize to anyone for depending upon our Creator. I feel sorry for those in the rooms who do. We can laugh at those who think spirituality the way of weakness. Paradoxically, it is the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. By the way, this program is not a program for sissies. If we don't have the courage to face ourselves, we can't make it. We never apologize for God. Now we go right back to the third step prayer again. Instead, we never apologize for God. Listen to this now. Instead, we let Him demonstrate through us what He can do. That's what we ask God to do for us in the third step prayer, wasn't it? To make examples of us, of His power, His love, and His way of life, by taking away from us our difficulties. So it tells us here again that we're letting God demonstrate through us what He can do. Now here's the solution to our fears. We ask Him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what He would have us be. And once we commence to outgrow fear. So therefore, let me give you a little formula. This will always work for you. Fear, recognized and written down, discussed with another person, turned over to God, equals no fear. Fear, recognized and written down, discussed with another person, and turned over to God, equals no fear. Now I'm going to, just before the raffle, but I want to do this. This is not in the book. I'm just going to share with you the fear that I teach to people I sponsor. God, these are my fears. And then we tell all our fears to God. I'm powerless over these fears. I can't get rid of them myself, and I need your help. God, please remove these fears from me and show me what you would have me be. Amen. And that was what works, and it works for all of us who use it. And I hope that maybe it will be helpful for you. The wording is not that important, but I think you get the idea. Remember that we always confess our powerlessness when we go to God asking for His help. And we always tell Him what the problem is. We don't just assume that he knows it. Next week, we're going to be concluding our study of the fourth step, and we'll be looking at our sex inventory. Some people call it our sex crimes. So we'll spend an hour and a half talking about sex. Okay, the next order of business is that we got to do a drawing for a raffle. And I don't know, what are we giving away tonight? What's the raffle? A book? A book right there. Somebody gets a book tonight. Okay. Somebody needs to draw the winning raffle ticket.
She didn't write any either. That's my sponsor here. Great person. Okay?
All right, where are the tickets? You got them? Had a girl. You got to mix them up. Mix them up big time because somebody's going to complain if you don't.
Okay. Here is the winner. It's nice. You got the okay. Here we go. Here, you can pick one. Pick one now. Okay. Can I use your microphone?
Of course you may.
Hi, I'm Rose Diamond, Addis Alcoholic. Hi. The winning number is 1513813. Come on down.
3813. Did you get it?
Oh, it's not me.
Anybody? 1513813. You have? Okay, going once. Going twice. Gone. Let me try one more. Okay. The winning number 1513806.
3806.
This is true. Here you go.
Congratulations, baby.
I believe you.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, that's it. That's
Check
it.
it carefully. Check it carefully.
One more. Are we going to do two, right? One more.
What?
Is that your number?
That's good.
Oh, wait, pull again.
Huh? Want to do it again? We're going to give away two of them? Okay.
See, we're special. We're doing it again. The number is 1513803.
3803. 3803.
Okay. We're going to do it. Going on? 25? It's gone. Okay. We're trying to give away this information. 1513800.
You got it. Sure, we'll be glad to. Sure.
The chip. Oh, he gonna do the chip.
Okay, guys, let's see. We've got some chips up here. Anybody who's been out improving their resume, doing further research, or just joining us would like to pick up a white chip tonight? What's your name? David? Our new friend David. Hey David, wait a minute, don't run up. You got a big book?
No, sir.
I'm right over here, you just got it. And now behind door number 2. Anybody got 3 months tonight?
Willie. Willie?
All right, guys, this is Willie with 3 months. Anybody else with 3 months?
I already got mine this afternoon.
Well, you get to get up here. Come on, we're going to give you another one. This is a special red chip for old timers.
13 months in January.
13 months.
January.
In January. Well, okay, well then you get a special red chip. What's your name? What's your name? You want to tell us the name?
Jerry, I'm an alcoholic.
You're Jerry?
Been sober 9 months. Hey, Jerry.
All right, that's Jerry. Good going there, Jerry. We got blue chip. What was that? What did I just give out? A blue chip? Red chip. Oh, okay. Character defects are sneaking up on me. Blue chip for 6 months. Who's got one coming tonight? Here we go. All right. Oh, Calvin. All right, Calvin. Anybody else with 6 months? No? Okay. Now then, you've got 9 months. You're now been sober long enough. We can trust you with some aluminum. Anybody got 9 months? Want to pick up half of a beer can? All right, now then, this is September. Who has an AA birthday in September? Get your hand up. How many years in there? 1 year. 2 years. 2 years. 1 year. 5 years. 3 years. 4 years. 6 years. 2 years. I'll get it right. Happy birthday to all you guys. Oh, and we got some more. 0 years. Okay, we got a 0 year. We got to get rid of that heckler too. Oh, we have some fun. Oh, wait a second. Now we.
A lady friend in that ain't never drank, but I'm going to bring her in her birthday, September the 26th.
Okay, good. Let's do that. That's old Gary. He got 13 months going on 6. Are there any, let's lie down, you can't leave yet. Hey, police, stop him, he's trying to leave. Thank you, that's good.
Business meeting.
What?
Business meeting. A business.
Well, we're gonna have a business meeting immediately following this, so don't go wandering out too far. Our business meetings are really something, man, we just get each other's throats and we fight. Actually, they're pretty calm. If you like a good business meeting where everybody gets mad, everybody don't come to ours. So, anybody got any announcements for the good of AA?
Good.
Tom has. Hang on a minute. Tom's coming up.
If you don't know, we have the my name is Tom and I'm an alcoholic. And if you don't know, we have the Labor Day picnic and the information is on the board. If you do not have a ticket, I have a couple of them left. If you don't get one, Connie told me that she would have some at the gate if you don't have the money with you tonight. All right?
Heck, that sounds good. That's good. That was Tom, guys. Listen, hey, Tom, don't stand right there. Now, Tom is the manager of this place. He does a superb job, and he's been our friend since we started, and he always does. Give him a big round of applause.
Okay, interruption here. The 27th annual intergroup picnic, Schneider Park, 4th Avenue. Well, all this stuff is on the board. That's on September 30th, 10 a.m. till And then accessibility committee, wow, gotta have that word in there. That's for nursing homes. This is for information on helping people get to meetings. It's pretty cool if there's a lot of people that can't get here unless someone helps them. And these are both on the board. If you want some more information, just ask me. I'm here anytime after 6:30 in the morning. Y'all stop by.
See what happens when you compliment somebody, they immediately have to come back and do it again. Okay, guys, that's it. I want to thank you all for being here. Be back next week.